Hey class, so I'm recording this quick video to kind of give you an idea of how to tackle your character design or your creature design painting. This project is pretty quick, so the techniques that I'm using here are just to help you paint quickly and efficiently. So what you're watching is just a quick time lapse. The original video was about 40 minutes, but this one's down to 20 something, so it's sped up a little bit, but it still has a nice speed where you can see exactly what I'm doing. I have my reference board open like always, so just to give you some ideas of what I want to do. When I began the painting, I wasn't sure what I was going to make yet. I just knew that I needed to paint this quickly. So what I'm doing first is creating the silhouette of this character that we showed in class last time. So I'm not being um, too careful with the lasso tool. I just want to make his silhouette so I can create a clippy mask and draw inside that silhouette. So that's what you're seeing here is just me trying to get the general shape of him before I start painting. So this just helps me because I already had my sketch created, and I just really wanted to stay true to the sketch. So what you see doing is I'm adding a gradient to the bottom because I don't want to detail too much on the bottom. I really just want to focus on the top of the character. And I'm using photo references to kind of create some idea of what I want to do. So you'll see a lot of experimentation inside of this video. Just because I had no idea what I wanted to create. I just knew that I had to paint this quickly. So you see I'm kind of stretching around this pattern from the hyena, and I end up getting rid of it in the painting process. So I end up going with the tiger texture a little bit more. But you'll see kind of like how I'm working with it. So whenever I'm using a photo texture, I try to take out some of those hard edges created by the lasso tool. So that's what you saw there. And then I really wanted to take parts of this beetle. So the horn on the beetle I could use for my horns. So I really wanted to create something similar to it. I really like the color of it and the contrast. And I'm just kind of flipping it over. So all these layers are sitting inside the same clippy mask. So everything's staying within the silhouette. So I'm just kind of taking bits and pieces, using the photos just as inspiration. You'll see later that it goes into painting and I lose a lot of that stuff. But I just wanted to experiment just because this is a quick video and I just really needed to paint this out as quickly as possible. Even this picture of like the bull face I end up getting rid of later because I found something better that I kind of liked. And I still wanted it to be a painting, so I didn't want it to be like a photo bashed picture. So you'll see right here with this tiger texture, this is where things really start to click and I'm starting to get an idea of where I want to go with it. So I'm not using the tiger for any reason. I just really like its texture. So you can see like right there, erasing out the actual face of the tiger and then using its pattern on the legs. So what I'm thinking when I'm painting this is I'm thinking about those contour lines inside the pattern and how that wraps around my character's body structure. So this video, I just kind of, like I said, I had no idea what I was going to paint. I just knew that I needed to paint quickly. And this is just a really cool exercise to kind of tackle. Um, and like many other projects, it might not help if you're doing it for like Pixar because that's very, very character based. Whereas this is more, I'm doing more realistic stuff. So with Pixar, you'd be doing a lot of silhouettes and a lot of exaggeration. But if you're doing something like for Overwatch, this can be pretty cool where you can experiment with hard surface. Even for Studio Ghibli, you might be able to do this if you're doing like a watercolor paint. So using the watercolor brushes might help create some interesting creatures. So I think a lot of the stuff that I do in class actually leans a lot more towards Overwatch, even though it's not in its style, but some of the techniques might help with Overwatch stuff just because it's a little bit more in the area that I kind of work in, where it's like photo bashing and painting. Um, but any of these techniques you can use and then apply the stylistic approach afterwards. So you're seeing here, I turn off the sketch a lot because I really want to see if my painting is working. So my sketch is there to support me. I don't really keep my sketches for my drawings, but for some of you, you might want to keep your sketch in there. I just really just use it as a base for painting. Keeps me in check a little bit. So you can see I'm taking the influence of the pictures, using it to paint, picking up colors here and there from the texture of the tiger, and just thinking about how those lines are going to spread around. Even the beetle, kind of the beetle shell, I used it to create like the armor on him. Now, I don't know if this is something that I would keep if I were to take it to like a finished painting, because I'm not sure I want to keep this kind of um, color palette. But I thought it'd just be interesting to kind of play with. It really just depends on the references that you built. So I used a random reference board that I had for past demos, just because it's there and we're just trying to figure out the painting process. We're not trying to figure out be accurate with any of this. And you'll see that I experiment a lot. So like I'm picking up some of my painting from the legs and putting it on the chest and on the face. So this kind of gives you an idea of what I'm able to do. Stuff like this I would normally demo in class, but since we're short on time and we only meet once a week, um, it's not possible to do a whole painting and still give you time to work. So I try to do this as a recording just so you can go back and reference it. Originally, I was going to give you guys the PSD, but then I noticed that I actually collapsed my layers to create the shadow later on in the video, and I lost the layers where I actually painted. So I wasn't paying attention when I was creating that. But you see again, just painting, staying within the lines, treating it almost like a coloring book. I really liked that green that was on the bottom, so I took it and started applying it to some of the shadow areas. And this is that stage where you're kind of noodling around, just trying to figure out, why am I doing certain stuff? Um, I always paint in the direction of the form. So what I mean by that is like if we took all the like lines of the tiger, I try to follow the roundness of like the hooves and the roundness of the legs. Which way is the hair traveling in the actual fur? Afterwards, I do change the scarves a little bit because I wanted to add a little bit of movement. So I make those a little bit softer on the edges, and you'll see that in a little bit. But again, just adopting color, painting in, trying to come up with some quick stuff. And you'll see when I turn off the right there, the sketch, you could see that the painting is starting to work. And I go back and forth on that a lot. I just want to see how it looks without the drawing. So here I was kind of experimenting with something that I saw earlier this week. So I saw James Pack creating like a color dodge layer and he would paint light with it. Um, but at the end, I didn't really like it. I kept it for a little while, but for me, the color dodge just doesn't really work. It makes it a little bit too saturated, and no matter how much I try to play with it, I just didn't like the color. It just messed with me a lot. So I ended up getting rid of it later. And you'll see when I kind of get rid of it that I prefer to paint in the light. It might be a cool technique for other things, but it wasn't really working for me for this project. Sorry, here I come to just throwing it everywhere, trying to see, hey, like, does this work? does it help me with form? But you could see it's kind of interesting, but I just, no matter how much I tried to adjust the saturation and the lighting, it just didn't give me the results that I wanted. Despite not having an idea of what I wanted to do, I knew that the lighting didn't work. I even tried to use it in shadows later on, but then I was just like, no, I'm gonna just paint my textures out instead. So even though I was experimenting, I did spend a lot of time on this trying to figure out if I could use that technique. Um, and that's what I encourage you to do is like take certain techniques from this video and see if you can apply it to your character. Um, a lot of times it will help, sometimes it won't, but you know, you just kind of have to take each technique and see if it works for a certain project. This is something that I'd probably do for like environments too, is using the photos and painting on top of it. And when you're under a time crunch, especially with this project, since this is only like a 2 week project, you really want to get the best painting out of it. And having multiple techniques just helps you with time management too. So right here, I remember that I needed to save. I was just saving the project really quick. So I was going to create a demo on the paintings that you guys created this week as well, but I noticed that you guys haven't uploaded some of the projects, so I'm going to hold off on it until it's on there. Maybe we'll have some time to talk about it in class on Wednesday. But yeah, I was going to complete that demo and just the projects weren't uploaded yet, so we might have to revisit that later on. Here you see I'm using the lasso tool and using the mixer brush to put in some rust. And I end up adjusting it with like a overlay, but I also adjusted with the levels because I didn't really like how reflective it was. So I had to tone it down a little bit. So the lasso tool just really helps keep edges clean. But towards the end of the video, you'll notice that I start going in there with painting too. So I start painting edges just to bring some stuff together. So if you notice, like in this part, a lot of the armor is blending in with some of his body. But that's where edge control and a little bit of painting takes care of that later on. This one was kind of an interesting texture. I didn't know what it was. I was just like, okay, let's see what it could do. And I was like, oh, this is kind of weird. But then I found it to be helpful for highlights. So you'll see right now when I change the layer style, it creates some really cool effects, almost metallic-y. So I kept a little bit of it. Even looks like fire a little bit too. But that's where it's helping me separate the light and the dark from the armor. So even if you don't like using photo bashing, I'd say just experiment with it. You never know what another technique is going to show you or how far it's going to push you. It's just really cool sometimes to see what you're able to make with it. So right here, I was trying to clean up some of the shadows because they were a little bit too dark for me. I felt like they were getting a little bit on the black side, so I needed to put some color in there. But I think even those end up getting painted later on, so I get rid of it. If you were to look at this character or creature based on its silhouette, I think it's really successful. Um, the only hard part is painting, you know, spending that time and noodling around and trying to figure out what you want to do. So you see here, I'm bringing another photograph, adding a blur to see if I can create a little bit more lighting. But if you were to squint at the character right now, like the silhouette is really, really interesting. So as long as your silhouette's working and it's not too confusing to read, then you have a pretty good creature going. So I was just changing layer styles there, trying to figure out if I wanted to keep that photo texture. And then I'm erasing away a lot of the light here. And I chose to make the video this way with a voiceover instead, just because it's a lot quicker, as opposed to like sitting there for like an hour and watching me paint. This gives you a lot of information in a short amount of time, and you're still able to see kind of what's going on in there. So I think this is where I actually start painting. So you'll see right now that I start painting in hairs. And I have some pretty cool shadows and some interesting midtones, but I really just wanted to push the highlights in this creature. So again, just checking to see if I could get rid of the drawing yet. And then one of the final steps I do take at the end is breaking the silhouette a little bit more. So I actually stop using the clippy mask and I start painting some details outside of it. But you'll see that in a bit. And this is that noodling part. It's just adding little details, trying to figure out what you want to do. This probably takes up the most time is trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to paint this? And a lot of my paintings are very, very heavy on indication. So I don't actually paint every strand of hair. I just indicate that this is hair by adding a shape that looks like it. And this painting could probably go a lot more polished than what I ended up with. But you can see it's reading kind of cool when I turn off that sketch in there. So again, super important to break up the shapes. You can see that dark outline with that reddish color is helping to push out the armor. And just taking my time to clean stuff up. Now your stylistic approach for your company is going to change the way everything looks. But you can see if I would have used like a softer brush, more like watercolor, this could have been a good character for Studio Ghibli. If I went more rendering and exaggeration in shapes, could have used it for Overwatch. I'm not sure it would have worked for Tim Burton. I probably would have needed something a little bit more darker. And then just fixing the hooves a little bit because they didn't really read correctly. And you can see I still have a lot of picture in here. So I slowly start to break it up with some more brush strokes. I knew there was a hand in that area that I didn't get to render, but I could see the silhouette of it. And I thought, okay, that's something that I might have to consider. So I started adding some highlights to break up the shape. But overall, I thought this character was kind of cool, or creature. Super interesting, having like this almost centaur bull. And like, why is he wearing armor? I don't know. He's probably going into battle or something, or chasing those guys that we painted in the environment. And again, just trying to break up shapes. You don't have to be super, super detailed with some stuff. As long as your values are great, your silhouette is good, you really do start to push the character. And I'm just adopting colors from the entire painting. So I adopted some gray there from the horns to kind of indicate the nose. And this is where I start to break the silhouette. So I actually made a brand new layer on top of everything that's in the clippy mask. And I started painting a little flyaway hairs and like things hanging off of the creature. Because I thought it'd be kind of cool if you had like all this kind of like unmanaged hair, where some are long and some are small. And this just helps the silhouette of the character or the creature. Some of the hair on the armor. So how does it interact? And it takes away like that cleanness of like the harsh line. If you notice on that leg where I was working right now, there's still some photo in there, but it's not a big deal because the character's mainly dominated by painting. And then this is where I change the scarves a little bit. So I actually delete some of the scarf off of the clippy mask, and I create these random shapes. And I use a soft brush to actually paint in so it looks like a movement. Because I thought it'd be kind of cool if it was just some flyaway stuff, just to add a little bit more of a style to it. So you notice that I don't even paint it all out. I leave it a little bit white so it falls into the background. And then adding a little bit of floor here so he doesn't look like he's floating. So I just took a 40% gray, erased out the edges. And then I was starting to think about adding a shadow. So I merged all my layers down together, and this is the reason that I lost everything, because I was making a copy that I can reflect down and use as a shadow. So I distort it here. Then make sure the hoof is still touching because that's actually on the ground. And I filled it in with a gray and then erased away some of the edges or painted a lighter value in it, either way. So it looks like a shadow. So pretty quick video on how to paint out one of your creatures. Super fun to do it. Obviously, still a lot of work to do onto it if I wanted to take it to finish, but it's a really good way to kind of begin. So I hope this helps, and let me know if you have any questions.